Now, next, I will just show you whatever we just see. So this is going to be just high-level architecture that we will have. A user uses a browser. It could be IE, Firefox, or Opera, or Chrome, or anything. Sends a request like we did. We just typed jntuk.k.edu.n. The request is sent to the web server. The PHP has been set up within Apache. I'll show you the installation and how we can set up PHP. The request is then in PHP. So when we look into the history of PHP, you guys have seen Perl, right? So in your previous sessions, Perl was created sometimes in late. Who is the creator of PHP? He was actually developing or creating his own personal homepage, which he calls as a personal homepage using a Perl and CGI script. But then he created his own language and then he speak. PHP 2 was released in 1997, and that time they named it hypertext preprocessor. So currently, if you see PHP 5.6.30 is the latest stable release as of January 19, 2017, and there is a parallel PHP 7.1.2 release, which is a stable PHP 7 release. So these, like especially 5.6, which have been going on for long, it is this 5.6.30. This is majorly for maintenance and several security bug fixes. So we look into the overview of PHP. So we just saw the architecture diagram where when a request from the browser is sent to the web server, which in turn passes or forward the PHP script. So when a PHP document is requested of a server, the server will send the document first to a PHP processor. So unlike your Java or C++, compiles the code into machine language, PHP does not involve or include any compilation. It is just an interpreter. When the request is sent to the PHP, it just interprets it and then returns back to the web server, which in turn returns back to the client or browser. The result of the processing is just the response to the request. So there are two modes of operation. One is your copy mode, in which HTML is copied to the output, which we just saw, like, your company's website, PHP has processed and then sends back the HTML code. Second one is in your HTML code itself, you can write your PHP code, which is interpreted and then converted or, presented into HTML elements, which is then returned back as the output to the browser. So the client or your browser will never see PHP code. It just sees the output produced by the code. So if we see, let me share that site again. So if you see company website or, this JNTU website, if I right click and then say view page source. So this is the source of the home page that we have seen for JNTU Kakinada. All you see is just HTML and CSS and JavaScript code. You will not see PHP code because that resides at the server side. I hope it is clear now. So let's go back to our slide. PHP has typical scripting language characteristics. It has dynamic typing or untyped variables, which means you don't need to define the type of a variable. PHP will interpret it based on the context or the use that that variable will be in. We will see an example there. And then it has associative arrays, it has pattern matching, and there are a lot of libraries available. Like you will have an extension for MySQL integration, you will have an extension for curl, you will have an extension for PDO, which is PHP data objects, and there are a lot of extensive libraries available. Now let's go back, and then I'm going to share one example. I've just seen that where we have used $name variable or $message variables, all PHP statements are terminated with semicolons. So you can create compound statements. It starts braces. Variables in a compound statements unless that is the body of a function. So when you're defining a function, there in the body you can declare and define variables. But when you are using compound statements, if it is not a function, then you cannot define variables there. I'll just show about this. So if you see my these are one-line comments. This is how you can write your one-line comments. And then if you need multi-line comments, then you can write it like this. So you can write multiple line comments, or you can even use hash. Move on. don't define any variable, it's going to be null by default. What are variables actually in PHP? Variables are not declared except in order to specify scope or lifetime. So when I define a variable in that in a file, that is actually the scope of that variable for that file, or the file or the files where I'm including this file. If I'm declaring a variable in a function, the scope of the, that variable will be within that function. So a variable that has not been assigned a value is unbound and has the value null. Null is nothing but it is coerced to 0 if a number is needed. That that we have seen in the past, in the previous slides, like PHP is implicit typecasting. You don't need to explicitly define the type of a variable. So PHP, if a number is needed based on the context, consider that variable if it has not been assigned a value as 0. If it is an empty string and if you need a string, then it's going to use that as if it's a null and not been defined. And if you need string in your execution, then PHP internally take that but as in form. If it is not defined, then Boolean. There are a lot of variable names which are reserved in PHP, like $_post. When you have form data and when you post a form, those elements you can access using $_post global variable. So these $_post, $_get, $_server, these are nothing but called as global variables. So you have seen in one of the examples this $_get. We'll see how it works. If you see this file, we have used $_get and then name. So name is nothing but a query string which I have passed when I'm calling that file in the browser. So if you see here, so this is when I'm calling this index.php file, I'm passing a query string with the key as name and the value as Jntuk. So what PHP does is with $_get, we can access these query string keys and values. So when I say $_get name, it is going to give me the value of that key, which is name. So the value is Jntuk. So that's what we have printed in the output. Hi, and then whatever the name is passed, I'm just reading it and then putting it in the output. So that's the usage of global variables. We have a lot of global variables. You can just browse php.net for looking into the documentation of PHP. If you guys have any kind of questions, feel free to comment in the chat box. And then there are error reporting as well, function which is provided in PHP, which will report the set of levels of problems in the script. So we can use this error_reporting. There are two ways that we can do this. If you want errors to be reported to the user or the browser, we can turn it on in the PHP configurations itself, or if those are off there, we can just turn it on by calling this function in the script that we need. So there are a lot of levels that you can you have actually in PHP. So these are just some examples that I have listed down here. But ideally, as we have in other languages as well, there are majorly three types of errors that PHP provides details about. One is fatal errors. Fatal error means it will stop the execution of PHP script at that point itself. So it will not proceed for the execution. So if you have fatal error, it will stop the execution there itself. Then you have warnings. If you try to access a variable which has not been defined or declared, PHP will complete the processing or execution, but it will throw a warning. So you can decide whether warnings to be shown to the user or not. And then you have notices. Notice, PHP just gives a notice. Actually, when a variable is not declared or defined, it throws a notice. And then you're trying to include a file which doesn't exist. These kind of errors, it reports under warning. So we can use this error reporting function. When you say 0, it will not report any kind of errors. But when you say all, it reports all the PHP errors. Or you can specify whether you want to see errors or warnings or parsing errors, or you want to see notices. Let's look at an example. A function called include once. What I'm going to do is let's just include once, and then I'm appending X. Let's see when we execute what it is going to produce. Okay. So when we execute this file, you see fatal error because that function does not exist. If you see, it is throwing an error saying call to undefined function include once in this file on line 7. If you see this file, so you might be wondering, like, I have not called that error reporting function, but still it is reporting errors. So I have that enabled in the configuration itself. So I've enabled logs in the configuration itself. Let me see if I can open that file and show you guys. So PHP configurations will be there in php.ini file. So this is the file where we will have all the configurations. You see, so this is where I have enabled that to report all the errors. So this means that I don't want to see any duplicated or strict errors. Just exclude them and then report all the errors. And then if you make any changes in the configuration, you'll have to make sure that you restart Apache. Another thing that we can do is we can we can log the errors. So you can log errors in error log file. Okay. So what we can do is if you want to, don't want to show the errors, as well as, you want to store that in a file, then we can also specify here error log. I want to store that in some place, let's say. So I want to store all the errors in the error log as well. So we can just go and then restart the server. And we can go and then so this is how we have executed, and it has thrown that error. Now we'll see that error log file. So in the configuration, I told to the PHP that, okay, log all the errors in this log file. And then PHP code, as you guys know, should be written in between this PHP start and end tag. So I have for example, and then we will execute this file. We can execute the same script in browser as well. I'm just executing it in command prompt so that it is more easy. Okay. So as I have told that PHP is, we don't need to explicitly define the type of variable. If you see in this example, I have a variable called $foo, and then I have an integer as well as a floating point number as well as string. So this is, I have defined this as a string. So when I said to PHP that I need a output of this, so if you see, PHP will implicitly convert this and then returns the output. You'll see that it has output 11.5. So we told PHP give me the uh, sum of 1 plus in string 10.5. So it has implicitly converted those types and then returned the floating point output. So characters in PHP, like you have seen in other languages or scripting languages, are 1 byte. String literals are enclosed in single or double quotes. So just now we have seen an example with double quotes where we have put the floating point number in string. Similarly, in PHP, you can have a double quote string or a single quote string. So when you have single quote string, PHP is not going to interpret anything in between. It is going to return output as is. But in case of double quoted string, PHP is going to interpret that and then it will escape the sequences and it will also interpolate the variables. We will see an example of that. So a literal dollar sign in a double quoted string must be escaped with a backslash. We will see an example of that as well. So how you can escape quotes in this string. Double quoted strings can cover multiple lines. The included character as are part of the string value. Let me show you an example of this. So I've created a file called string.php. Another thing, just wanted to mention that it's always better to use some kind of IDE, integrated development environment, for these kind of scripts, where it will be easy for you to manage your scripts. We can still use Notepad as well. I have used Notepad++ so that it is more user friendly, but we can open the same file is using Notepad as well. So if you see my screen, I have created a file called string.php with two variables. So $x is hello world and $y as well, hello world. I have just used two strings. If you see, the first one is with double quotes and then the second one is with single quotes. I can print both $x and then I'm using a element break element there, and then I'm printing $y there. So let me open that in the browser and then we will see. So we have a file called string.php. If you see, both $x and $y are printed. And if you see the page source, PHP has just returned the HTML or CSS or JavaScript. In this case, we have not used any HTML except this break element. Now we will just see some more examples here. So what we have just now learned is double quotes. If you have variables there, it can interpolate it. So I'm saying I'm creating a variable called dollar, let's say, message with hi, and then let's say dollar $X, like this. So it can interpolate, it can interpret this variable in I mean, which is declared in double quotes. So let's execute this and then see what it produces. So when I execute this, you will see it has printed hello and then hello world. Okay. So you see it printed hello Jntuk, and then we are printing hello world as declared as $Y. So if you say this, I've used hello here. If I declared, if I call this $X in single quotes, you will see is it is not going to interpret it. You see, in single quotes, it is not going to interpret anything. It is going to return as is. But in double quotes, it will interpret the variable call, and then it will append it, and then it will return the output. Okay. That's about the strings. And then we have this Boolean type, which is also a scalar type. Okay, sorry about the interruption. So the next one is the Boolean type. So Boolean, if you see in any kind of language, we have this either true or false. So it's mostly used in conditional testing. Like if you want to see if value is this, then do this. If value is this, then do this. Like that kind of testing or conditional statements that we usually go for Boolean types. So other type values are coerced as needed by context. For example, in control expressions, the integer value 0, the empty string, and the literal string all count as false. Null as well as as false as well, and then the double value counts false, which is going to be 0.0. However, double calculations rarely results in the exact value 0.0. Let's look in the example. So I have another example here that how we can escape in PHP. If you see, I want to print Tata Consultancy Services in double quotes. So this is, we can use backward slash to escape double quotes. So when I execute this, so when I will be executing this script, it is going to print that Tata Consultancy Services in double quotes. So you may have a requirement like you want to specify some string in double quotes in as part of your output, then you can use this escape characters. Now we will see some of the Boolean examples. We'll just write some simple examples in our PHP file. So we will say, so we'll write some conditional statement here saying that if $x equals to hello, then print hello example, else just print hello. Okay. We'll just execute this and then see what it prints. So if what we are checking for here is if X is hello, and then or else we can just say if X is there. If X is defined, it's going to print this, else it's going to print this. Okay, let me share my screen. You see what we have a conditional statement where we say if X is defined, if X has some value, you remember if X is not defined, it's going to still consider it as null, and null is going to be false. So if X is not defined, then it's going to print that the else part. But if X has some value, then it's going to print this hello world example. This is what the code looks like. Okay, so that was about Booleans. So we have seen all the scalar types. We have seen integer, double, string, as well as Boolean. Now let's move on to arithmetic operators and expressions. So PHP, as I told, suppose we have in C, C++, Java. So integer divided by integer results in integer if there is no remainder, but results in double if there is a remainder. Like in the example, if you see 12 by 6, it has gonna be no remainder, it's gonna be an integer in the results. But if you do 12 by 5, there is a remainder and it's gonna print that as, in the double as 2.4. There are a lot of functions available. I've just highlighted here a few of the most commonly used numeric functions that we have in PHP scripts in most of the applications that we develop in PHP. So we have floor, which is not going to be, it's just round the number to the down to the nearest integer, and its opposite is ceil. And the round will, based on the number, the floating point number, it's going to either a number down or number up to that integer. And the rand is a function which generates a random integer. We have absolute, which is going to give the positive value of that the provided number. Minimum in an array, we will see about the arrays in tomorrow's session, but for now, array is nothing but it's a key value pair. It's a number of items, group number of items into one array. And minimum will return the lowest in that array, and its opposite is max, which will return the highest value in an array. So we will look into the examples. The random number. Absolute will give the absolute positive number. And then minimum, this is an array. This is how we will have a collection of items in an array. So out of this array, it's going to give the minimum number, and we will have maximum number. So we will see when we execute what it is going to resolve. So if you see my screen, we have 0.60 that we have passed, and we call the function floor. So it is going to give the nearest number down of that integer. So 0.60, it is going to give 0. When we use ceil, we provided 0.40, which will give the number up of the nearest integer. So if we give 0.40, the nearest number is going to be 1. And then we call round function for 5.4, which is based on 5. If it is 5.4 or 5.5, it is going to give you 5. If it is 5.6 or 5.9, it is going to give you 6. Round will decide the nearest number up or the number down based on the provided input. And then we have called a random function, which has given some random number. And we also provided, we call the random function and provided range that it should get the random number. We gave 10 and 100, so it gave 67. And then we call the absolute for 6.7. Absolute will give the positive value. So 6.7 was already positive. It's going to return as is. But if we see absolute for minus 3.4, it is going to give minus 3. It is going to give the positive value of it, so which returns the positive value 3. And then we provided an array array of 5 elements, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We call the minimum function, min function, which is going to give the minimum value in that array, which is 2. And then we call maximum max function, which is going to give the maximum value. So let me share the code. This is what we had. So this returns 0, this output 1, this output 5. If we had 5.6, then it's going to return 6. But if it is 5.4 kind of thing, then it's going to give the 5. So round is nothing but internally it's going to decide whether to floor or whether to ceil. This will generate some random number. And this we have provided a range. in between 10 to 100, I need a random number. It provided 67. Here we are calling abs function to return the absolute value of 6.7, which is going to return the positive value, so it returns the same 6.7. We call the same function by providing input -3, which is negative value, but abs function is going to return the positive value, so it returned 3. Here we call the function by providing an array of elements 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So this function is going to return the minimum value, and the same max is going to return the maximum value. So these is nothing but arithmetic operations that we have seen in the slide. This is just an example of all those. But you can go through php.net for the documentation of arithmetic operations. There are a lot of numeric functions available that you can practice in your PHP learnings. Now let's move on to strings. So we have seen strings already. We have seen how we can use strings in calculations as well, like we provided 1 plus, and then in strings we provided 10.5, and then we saw the results as 11.5. So string operations, there are a lot of string functions that PHP provides. Those are built-in functions that you can use for a lot of string operations. The first one we have seen is this string concatenation, which will be indicated with a period. Mostly, we can use this when we are going for single quote strings, and then we want to concatenate it with some variables. We will see an example of that shortly. So part of a string, if you want to access, let's say you have a string called Jntuk, and you want to just get the output Jntu, you want to remove k or something, you want to get only k, then you can use substr function. We will see an example of that also. And then we can access single characters in a string using square brackets. So when we use square brackets, and a string will be converted to an array, and then we can just access each characters of that string. There are a lot of functions available, like if you want to get the length, like Jntuk is a 5 character string, then you can just use strlen, which will return the length of that string. We can also compare strings. We can, if you want to remove some white spaces or some characters from the string, you can use chop function. There are a lot of string functions, built-in string functions available in PHP. You can again, that is not to cover all, is not the scope of this session because of the limitation of the time. So, but if you want to learn more about the string operations or string functions, you can just browse through php.net for the documentation. Now we'll just see quickly example of string operations. So if you see my screen, so we'll see, we will just check, we'll just declare a variable called Jntuk, and then what I'll do is I'll just concatenate it with let's say we're using single quotes. It's always better when we are planning for a single quotes. If you don't want most of your simple output to be processed by PHP, it's always advisable to go with a single quote. Like I don't want high to be again processed by PHP because it's going to take some time. So I'm just saying, okay, so name could be anything. So what I'm doing is give me the output. Don't send this high comma to PHP. Just replace name with the actual value and then return it. So we will see that. Okay, so and then we are using substr function to return some of, if you see the input I'm providing is A, B, C, D, F, and F minus 1 will give the last letter. And then if you want to see last two, then you can use -2. And then you can also provide how many letters you want to return in the output from where to where. So I'm saying -3, but just give me one letter. So it's going to be -1, -2, -3, and then you want output just one character, you can just go for go for 1 here. And also what we have seen is I have two strings here. String is just hello world and string 1 is also hello world. String of 0, we discussed that we can access part of string by in square brackets by providing the index number of that character. String of 0 is going to give me h. So if I say string of 3, which is 1, 2, 3, L, it's going to print me L. And then string, we can also say, if you want to get the last one, what you can do is you can use string length function, get the string length, and then get me the last character of this string. So it's going to give me exclamation mark. And then we can also use str compare. I have two strings, string and string 1, we can compare. We can also chop, we can use chop function. Out of string, just remove the word exclamation. So this is going to return you just hello. So we'll just quickly, then we will see. Okay, so let me just execute. Let me quickly execute this script. -1, which returns F from the input A, B, C, D, E, F, and then -2 for E, F, and then -3 for D. And we have also seen that how many, the characters that we want sub-str to output. We have also seen how to access part of the string using square brackets and index number of that character. And we have also seen, if you see that hello, which is, chop, and above that is 0, PHP will return when you use string compare function, strcmp function. If it matches, then it returns 0. If it doesn't matches, then it returns, if the first string is lesser than second string, it's going to return -1. If it is greater, then it's going to return 1 or, any positive number. Okay, so let's move on. So this is about strings, and then we will see scalar type conversions. So implicit type conversions as demanded by the context in which an expression appears. This we have seen in few of the examples. A string is converted to an integer if a numeric value is required, and the string has only a sign followed by digits. So what we have seen in a previous example where we added where we wanted a sum of 1 plus and then 10.5 in string. So that string was converted to a floating point number and then added to 1, which returns a floating point number 11.5. A string is converted to double if a number value is required and the string is a value double literal. That is what the example says. So we have a lot of, majorly 3 ways that we can convert a type. PHP implicitly converted, but if you want to explicitly do it in C style, then you can use the data type and then the variable like int in brackets, and then you can use variable like $sum here. We can use int val and then pass variable using several conversion functions, or we can still also use set type and then provide the type of data type that we want to assign it to the variable like $x. Type of any variable can be determined with get type function. And then if you want to check whether it is an integer or not, we can use int function. If you want to see whether it is an array or not, we can use is underscore array. If you want to see whether it is a string or not, we can use is string. If you want to say similarly check whether it is a number or not, we can use is underscore numeric. So there are a lot of functions, built-in functions available, which we cannot cover in this session. But if you are interested, then you can just go ahead to php.net and then follow the documentation about the scalar type conversions. Next is we have a lot of operators, built-in functionality, that we can use these operators for performing calculations. Like if you want to go for assignment operators, there are a lot of assignment operators available. We have decrement operators available, and then we have comparison operators as well. So in assignment operator, if you want to see, we can go for examples if we have time. If you see assignment operators, if you see x is equals to y, or we have seen $x is equals to some string, right? So that is nothing but an assignment operator. But if you have something, if you're doing some calculations like in numbers, like if you want to add, if you want to process in loops, then you can use this x plus y. These are all simple operations that we have learned in C and C++. Those are all supported in PHP. You can go for subtraction, multiplication, you can go for division, and then you can also go for modulus, and then concatenate just now using a period symbol, which is dot, and then you can use this increment, decrement, exactly similar to what we have learned in C and C++ or Java. And then in comparison operations that we have seen, like, I have shown a compound statement, if x equals to hello, or if, like that. So if you have double equals to, then it's going to return whether x is exactly equal to y or not. And then we have identical, which is going to check for the types as well. Okay, if 5 and if we have 5 as integer and then 5 as in string, it's going to return false, even though both says 5. And then you have not equals to. There are two ways for checking equals to and not equals to, and then there is another way for not identical. So there is a difference between identical and equal. Equal is going to check just the value, whereas identical will check the type as well. And then you have greater than, less than, and then greater than equal to or less than equal to, exactly similar as what we have learned in other previous chapters. So I'll just stop it today here, and then we will tomorrow just go through outputs and then control statements, arrays, functions, pattern matching, and then form handling. Remember, these are very important, especially, if you want to learn, if you want to create your own website, or if you want to work on the website development. As I told, syntaxes are important, and then form handling, and then file handling, and then the database integration. So form handling is also one of the important area if you want to learn on the website development. So I'll just stop it here today, and then we'll see you tomorrow. Any questions? Feel free to post a comment in the chat box.